Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Imposter to Empowered Masterclass. I'm so stoked about this because I'm really passionate about empowering women and helping you going from a doubter to a doer. And that's what we're going to do in this because I have noticed a pattern of a lot of the women that I coach, a lot of the clients that I coach, having imposter syndrome. So it's a thing, and you probably had it at some point in your life, and we're going to go over it right now. So let me share my adorable slides with you, and we're going to jump right in. All right. Can you guys see these? You see the slide? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, cool. So I am wearing my disco ball earrings today because I feel like disco balls are symbolic to me. Also, I have one in my office. Can you guys see that? Pink, I have disco balls all over my office. And they are symbolic because I really love to help you because disco balls were meant to move, basically. And so that's what I want to help you do. So let me give you a little background for those of you that might not know some things about me. I'm Kelly France. I am a mom of four. I'm a business coach to mompreneurs and the author of One Goal for 100 Days. I'm the host of the Top 1% podcast, Finally Fearless. And I run a direct sales team of 6,000 women who've sold over 300 million in sales, which is insane. I went from food stamps to 7 figures. I own 3 Airbnbs, so that's another side business that my husband runs, and we live in Southern California. So I'm a huge foodie. I gained like 10 pounds when we moved here from Utah, and so I love me some tacos and Mexican food because they have the best Mexican here. Love thrifting out here. Now my sons are super into thrifting, and I love boogie boarding, and I'm a dance floor diva. I love to get crazy on the dance floor. So that's a little bit about me. I'm gonna move. I want to make sure that my head is not in the way of of these slides. Okay, so let me put myself like over here. All right. So also, is it recording? Just give me a thumbs up if it looks like it's recording. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys. All right. So a little bit about me. Now, so my why, this is the disco ball analogy. So notice these disco balls are sitting on the floor. They're not moving. And that's not what I want for you. I want you to go from imposter to empowered because disco balls were meant to move and shine. Look at the difference between this one that is moving and shining versus a disco ball that is sitting on the floor. I want to help you take action and move and shine. So we're going to go from emotion to motion. We're going to get out of your head and into action. So today we're going to talk about the how, why, where, when, who, what of imposter syndrome. And so what is imposter syndrome? A lot of people don't even know what it is. So let me break it down for you. It is the fear and self-doubt that causes people to question their abilities, even though they have the accolades, the evidence, but they don't believe it. And it's the fear that you're a fraud who will be found out. Like you're afraid someone's going to reveal that you don't know what you're doing. Um, and it's when you feel not good enough or unworthy in some way, which makes it difficult to recognize and celebrate your own strengths and accomplishments. So I love me some graphics, love me some visuals. And so this is a pie chart. And basically, this is how capable you actually are, and this is how capable you think you are. I see this in so many women where I'm like, you have insane potential. You're going to do so many things, but they don't see it. And so it's hard for them to take action like the disco ball and shine. And here's a Venn diagram of imposter syndrome. And believe me, I've had it too. Where you feel like I deserve to be here, but then you feel like I don't belong. And imposter syndrome is kind of like the mix of the two, where you're like, I deserve, but I don't belong. Ugh, and it kind of makes you feel a little crazy. I'm sure you guys have felt this. Um, so you're in the right place if you doubt your skills, talents, and accomplishments, if you fear that you're not enough and you will be found out, if you have a hard time believing or accepting praise or recognition, girl, you're in the right place. So let me explain. This is my signature philosophy on why we get imposter syndrome. I did a ton of research on imposter syndrome, and it was actually interesting because I felt like nobody gave a good solution and didn't really explain the why very well. And so I came up with my own reason why. And I really believe this checks out. So it's based on two things. Number one is that you're starting something new. And maybe you don't feel like it's something new. Maybe it's like you're you're making reels consistently for the first time. Or maybe it's that you're, starting a new like version of your business and you've never really done that version. And so it looks different. So it feels new. And it's based on the future, and it's when we deal with the three U's, and that is unknown, unfamiliar, and uncomfortable. It's when which is AKA fear. And my favorite acronym for fear is false evidence appearing real. So fear is just sometimes that we feel like we're unsafe, like we're gonna, we might die. But it's false evidence. So the other one is based on a new normal. So this is based on the past. And this is kind of when you discredit the past. And I've done this before. And it's a new normal is basically something we've experienced that's new repeatedly until it becomes your normal. So, and I'm such a word nerd. I had to make it all start with D's. It's when we discredit the past. It's when we don't remember all the steps that we took to get there. It's when we were deep in survival mode. And so you kind of just did what you had to do to survive. So it doesn't feel like that big of a deal. I'm going to give you examples of these. And you didn't acknowledge the small wins along the way. So a couple examples. I mentioned that I wrote this book, One Goal for 100 Days. And I wrote it in 100 days. And it was actually last fall of 2023 when we had just bought our third Airbnb and we were decorating it and things were crazy. I like had to decorate it and get it ready to launch, but also I was writing a book. And sometimes I'm like, what was I thinking? But I commit to things and I go for them. So I committed to writing it for 100 days and it was a whirlwind. I was in survival mode because I'm like, juggling motherhood, juggling my network marketing team, writing a book, and also trying to decorate an Airbnb all at the same time. So I was deep in survival mode and I just did what I had to do to survive. And I did it in 100 days. So it happened really fast and crazy. And sometimes I look back and I'm like, yeah, I just wrote a book. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And people are like, no, that's a huge deal. Right. But I think because I was in deep survival mode, I'm like, meh, it's my new normal. It's like, oh, I wrote a book. And same with going from food stamps to seven figures. That I was very much in survival mode when I was trying to pull my family out of, you know, like hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and out of just the struggle bus, the financial struggle. And so, yeah, I didn't really, just did it to survive. And of course, I didn't acknowledge my small wins along the way. I think if you're a mom, it's kind of hard to acknowledge our small wins because things are so busy, right? And then the other example I want to share is my mom, who was a single mom for many years, probably from my parents got divorced when I was 18 months old. And she didn't remarry till I was 5. So there was, 4 solid years where she was a single mom. And she used to work at Albertsons like at nights and then come home and chop wood so she could start a fire because we couldn't afford to heat the house and pull our mattresses up to the fireplace And I'm like, Mom, that was amazing. Like, it's amazing what you did. And she's like, and not really. Like, it was just what I had to do to survive, right? And I'm sure you guys see examples of this in yourself, in other women you know, where they're like, nah, it's not a big of a deal. But it is a big deal. It's just that we were deep in survival mode. So this is kind of why we get imposter syndrome. But let me tell you, here's why it's a good thing. Because it's a cue you're doing something new. Okay? It's a cue you're doing something new. It rhymes. I made it rhyme intentionally. That's out of your comfort zone. Because when you take little baby steps out of your comfort zone, that's a sign you're about to level up. And it doesn't mean like tomorrow. It might mean in the next quarter, in the next year, in the next 2 years. It takes time. Being a mompreneur it takes a lot of time and before you start building that momentum, right? But when you feel those moments of like, what am I doing? Who am I to do XYZ? It's because you're doing something new. And listen, teens have it. I have teenagers and they have imposter syndrome all the time. And you should too. They try new things all the time. Think about it. Teenagers are constantly trying new things. They're starting like their new, a lot of our kids just started school this past month or so, and it's a new grade with new, new teachers, new people in their classes that they don't know. And it's scary, right? And this is why they get imposter syndrome. You'll notice some of these signs, you'll be like, yeah, my teenager has that, or my tween, or whatever. It's because they're constantly stepping out of their comfort zone. They are trying a new sport. They're trying out for, a play. They're getting their first kiss. They're going on their first date. They're driving for the first time. They are doing so many new things all the time. But we as adults, we often get our comfort zone all set up and we're like, I'm nice and cozy. I'm going to stay right here because this is cozy. This is easy. This is predictable. It's familiar. It's comfortable and it's known, right? Which is the opposite of the unfamiliar, unknown, uncomfortable. But outside of our comfort zone is where the magic happens. I want to tell you, actually, I'm going to go back. So I'm going to give you an example of my teenager that I was really proud of him. So my 12-year-old this summer decided he wanted to go to a skateboarding camp, and it's called Woodward. And it's about 4 hours away from us. It's a week long and you sleep overnight in like little cabins. And he went without any friends because none of his friends could go. And so it was very brave of him. And I was like so impressed that he wanted to go all by himself for a whole week. So when my husband and I drove, 4 hours to take him there, and we dropped him off, and we're like, hey, here's your room, like here's your cabin. Well, he meets his like, what do they call it? His guide, his like camp counselor guide, whatever. That's gonna be in the cabin with him, and he was not friendly at all. So I'm like, cool, cool, cool. And then he walks in and there's like multiple bunk beds, and we all walk in and there's like a few teenagers sitting on there. They're all about his age, they're all about 12, 13, but they're all sitting there and they were all just like giving him the up down, probably because they had anxiety and imposter syndrome too. And they were scared too, but it felt scary I was like having secondhand fear for him. I'm sure you guys do this with your kids sometimes. I was like, oh my gosh, are we leaving him to like, are we throwing him to the wolves and just leaving him for a week? And I was like, okay, have fun, son. And I'm like, you're gonna do great. But I'm like, is he like, you know what I mean? I was scared. I was scared for him because I was like, is he gonna make any friends? You know what I mean? All those fears, all those false evidence appearing real. And later that night, I get this text, and it was the best text ever. And he's like, Mom, I just jumped off I just did a jump into a foam pit off a big old half pipe. And I was like, Okay, he's having a great time. Like, and he didn't say anything about friends or any, he wasn't like, come pick me up, any of that. So that was like me having imposter syndrome for him. But he putting himself out of his comfort zone. And because of that, he ended up meeting Tony Hawk, which, if you don't know, he's a huge skateboarding, he's a famous skateboarder that came and visited that week of all weeks. And I was like, look at what happened because he stepped out of his comfort zone. He got to, and it was such a big thing that he could brag to his friends who didn't come, and bonded over with the friends that he made there. It was just a really cool experience for him, and I was so proud of him. So I love this quote by Lori Harder. She says, your next level will require you feeling like a beginner, which can make you feel like an imposter. You can't be an expert or somewhere you've never been, or on somewhere you've never been. So we all have to start somewhere, and we all have to be a beginner in every aspect, in every new thing that you try. And as a mompreneur, you're going to try a lot of new things. Especially if you're trying to stay up to date with social media, there's a lot of new, things that, like, there's new broadcast channels that many of you may not have tried. Um, you know, Getting on TikTok, doing a live, like, there's so many things that are scary, but you're never going to be an expert until you start. So who has imposter syndrome? This is the who. You are not alone if you feel like if you've ever felt like a fraud. According to a review journal or a review article published in the International Journal of Behavioral Sciences, an estimated 70% of people experience imposter feelings at some point in their life. I honestly think it's higher. I feel like 100% of people have felt it in their life. But most of them are high achievers. So this is going to be fascinating for you guys. Listen, Maya Angelou, who has written 11 books, she's been nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. She's won 5 Grammys plus numerous other awards. She said this, I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out. So even Maya Angelou has moments of imposter syndrome. And probably a lot of it is because she's constantly putting herself out there and trying, like, okay, now I'm going to write a new book. So then you're like, who am I to write a second book or a third or, or I'm going to, put myself out there and try this new thing. So that's why it's not like you're ever like, I'm the expert officially. I've arrived and I will always be the expert. Emma Watson said who is in all the Harry Potter movies. She says, it's almost like the better I do, the more my feeling of inadequacy actually increases, because I'm just going, any moment, someone's going to find out I'm a total fraud and that I don't deserve any of what I've achieved. The Batman movie producer, Michael Uslan, the producer of every modern Batman movie, still gets imposter syndrome when he's in the studio. He says, I have this background feeling that one of my security guards might come in and throw me out. And this one's fascinating. Every year, the incoming class at Stanford Business School is asked, how many of you in here feel that you are the one mistake that the admissions committee made? And every year, 2/3 of the class immediately raises their hands. So I've noticed that it's often high achievers who have high expectations of themselves, and they are typically the ones who have imposter syndrome. But here's the irony, is that if I were to tell you that you were a high achiever, you probably would say no because you have imposter syndrome. And I'm going to explain why this is in a minute. So here's my story. This is an imposter thought I had at the beginning of this year because I wanted to try some new things this year. And one of them was that no one will buy a class or coaching from me if I'm not teaching how to make money. Because I wanted to coach mompreneurs, and I wanted to share about mindset and just kind of help them get their businesses going. But I saw all these people only talking about how to make money, or like, here's how much money I made, in the whole like MRR world. And so that was the story I was telling myself, right? And so I wanted to do it perfectly or not at all. I was procrastinating everything. I hid myself in research. I felt like fraud for not knowing everything. I wanted to take action. I wanted that disco ball to shine, but I felt paralyzed. And then not taking action was driving me crazy, kind of like that Venn diagram we talked about, where you're like, I'm worthy, I'm not worthy, I'm worthy, and I just felt so stuck. And I'm going to teach you guys how I overcame this. So where does it come from? Well, it starts with our thoughts, friends. Our brain is trying to keep us safe. So we have this thing called negativity bias, and it's basically your brain scanning for perceived danger. Because obviously your brain wants to keep you safe and know what to focus on. And if there's like a fire, it's not going to be like, well, why don't you make a reel right now when there's a fire in your office in the same room? It's always scanning to see what's dangerous. And to protect you. And so it looks for the negative slash drama. Now, in tribal days, if you got kicked out of the tribe, you wouldn't survive. And that's why, sometimes we have social anxiety and social fears because we don't want to be kicked. We don't want to be kicked out of the tribe and not survive. So when you face that possibility of being rejected, your brain thinks it's unsafe or it's facing a future death. And your brain can't differentiate the difference between, emotional danger and physical danger. So I want to ask you guys, what's the first thing that you notice here? Let me see if I can see the chat. I usually can't when I'm doing this, when I'm sharing my screen, but what's the first thing you notice here? I'm guessing that, it's the spider. Most people notice the spider first, even though there are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 flowers, beautiful flowers, but we notice the spider. That's negativity bias. This is an analogy I learned from therapist Emma McAdam. Now, here's my next question. Now, what do you notice? You guys can write in the chat. I'll have to read it later when I stop sharing. But I'm guessing that you're going to say the spiders, okay? Because that's what your brain does. It's like, oh, now there's multiple spiders. We are also in danger. Sometimes people will say, oh, I noticed the flower. And that's awesome. Like maybe you've trained your brain to focus on the positive, and that's fabulous. But I would say most of our brains are like, whoa, we got a lot of spiders here. There's even more danger. So, imposter thoughts are kind of like that perceived danger where you're like, I am a fraud. I'm not as talented as they think. These are actual thoughts that my clients have had that they've shared with me. So these are like legit thoughts of mompreneurs. So if you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. I'm a fraud. I'm not as talented as they think. I'll never be good enough. There's so many others doing it better. Why should they buy from me? I'm not capable of doing this. I'm not worthy of my success. So what imposter thoughts have you had lately? I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I just want to read the chat. Okay, Heidi said she noticed a whole heck of a lot of spiders. Yeah, right? That's negativity bias. That's our brains just checking for spiders, checking for negative things, checking for drama. So I'm curious, what imposter thoughts have any of you had lately? If you don't mind being vulnerable and sharing, I would love to hear. And then I'm gonna keep going with the chat, but I'll come back. You guys share if you're feeling brave. Oh, thank you for being brave. Okay, so someone said, I've felt like, I won't read your names, but someone said, I felt like my business isn't successful because I don't have a ton of new partners. Okay, not good enough. Someone else said not good enough. Someone else said there are too many things I'd have to sacrifice to be successful and fulfill my dreams. I'm guessing you guys are like, yeah, I think that too. Like, or I have thought that before. So again, you're not alone. And you know what else is fascinating is when you see these other women sharing this, you're like, no, girl, you can do this, right? Like we want to empower other women, but then it's often our our own thoughts that get in the way. And that's that negativity bias. But the thing is that everybody could literally tell you all the things, like all the reasons, all the evidence why you're amazing and you're capable and you're worthy and you're doing great. But if you don't believe it, it doesn't matter. I could tell you, you know, how wonderful you are, but if you don't believe it, it's not going to help you. Someone else said, I have to do my hair and have a cute outfit to get on social media, right? Yeah, these are all relatable. Okay, so let's go back to my slides. So, I want to talk about thoughts versus beliefs. So a thought is an idea or an opinion, and a belief is a thought that we think over and over. So with thoughts, we can think thoughts that we do not believe, and we can't always control what thoughts pop into our head. Sometimes we just have intrusive thoughts that pop into our head and we're like, where did that come from? Um, but beliefs are thoughts that we think are true. And we can control what we believe. So here's something I want you to think about. If a belief is a thought pattern that we think over and over and over, then we can change our beliefs by thinking new thoughts over and over. And I made you guys some fabulous visuals for this, okay? I love me a good analogy. So thoughts are kind of like the stuff in your purse, and beliefs are like a bag. And so you get to decide what goes in your bag of belief. So whatever thoughts we fill our bag with becomes a belief. And so what have you been carrying around in your bag of belief for too long? Is it weighing you down? Because sometimes have you ever had those moments where you like clean out your purse and you're like, I was carrying, in fact, I'd love to hear in the comments, like crazy stuff that you found in your purse that you were like, I had no idea I was carrying this around for for the last month or so. Like maybe it's just, I had one girl when I did this training say I had it like a literal half a banana in my purse like a week. Like, or it was a banana peel, I think. It was a whole banana peel like she was carrying around in her purse. And I'm like, yeah, that's trash. Okay? You got to empty the trash. Like we don't need to carry this crap around in our bags and have it weigh us down and have us slow us down on the progress that we want to make in our business. So spoiler alert, you've been filling your bag of beliefs with trash thoughts and negative evidence for too long. So just like that banana peel, sometimes we've had thoughts that we've held on to for a long time. And so I want to teach you about confirmation bias. So basically, confirmation bias is looking for evidence that supports your belief while ignoring those that don't. Now, this is basically when, like, for example, I'll tell my kids, like, like, you're doing awesome, or like, you're a good looking guy. And they're like, you just have mom goggles on. Like, you know what I mean? It's when you're like, I'm not going to believe that I'm throwing that in the trash. So I love this quote by Jessamy Hibbard. She said, imposter syndrome is a perfect example of confirmation bias because you decided a long time ago that you were a fraud. And for years, you've been building an argument in support of this. You have different rules for when you do well and when you do badly. Good stuff, reject. Negative information, you're all ears. So basically, in this visual, you can see how you've been carrying around these trash thoughts about how you suck, how you're a fraud, how you're not good enough for years. Like it's your bag of belief, and now you believe it. And you've been trashing any thoughts, any evidence of how you're awesome, or at least not focusing on those. So your brain is always looking for evidence to confirm the stories you've told. Your brain wants to be right. So whatever you look for, you will find. And so I'm going to teach you how to look for the good, how to see the good. And eventually, when you see the good, you're going to be the good. You're going to step into that. And so we're got to learn how to ignore the spiders, because there's going to be spiders for sure. Like on your, being an entrepreneur is hard. you're going to make mistakes, right? You're going to mess up. It's not going to be pretty. Like some of your first lives or reels or emails might suck. And that's okay, but you're going to get better. So how does it look like in our lives? What does imposter syndrome look like in our lives? It starts with our thoughts, and then it affects our thoughts affect our actions. So I want to teach you the 3 Ps of imposter syndrome. And these are modern responses to fear, because guess what? We're not being chased by tigers every day, you know, back in tribal days. So now there's different responses to fear. And so we all know fight, flight, and freeze, but these can look very differently in modern times. And they are also P words. I came up with P words. We prove, we procrastinate, or we get paralysis. So the first one is we prove by overworking, and we overwork to fight the fear, which leads to burnout. So I have definitely had this in the past where I'm like, I'm just gonna work. And like, and then you start to get bitter because you don't have a life. And then that leads to burnout, right? And maybe some of you have been there, done that, and you want to avoid that. And so now you're in paralysis because you're like, well, I don't want to, this is kind of one of your comments was like, I don't want to sacrifice, my priorities for this future business. And maybe you've been burned in the past. So you got a little bit of PTSD, maybe some trauma from hustle mode. I'm saying this from literal experience because I've been there, done that, where I was in hustle mode. I was proving, I was overworking, which led to burnout. It actually led to like my body shutting down and being like, we done, girl, like no more. But I want to help you not I want to help you not respond in one of these fear ways. I want to help you not have paralysis and be like, well, I don't want to go back to hustle mode, so I'm not going to do it at all. That's number 3, is you feel overwhelmed or not good enough to start, so you stay stuck. And I would add, or maybe you have trauma from being in hustle mode. And so you don't want to hustle, so you stay stuck. Procrastination is where you delay the action because you're afraid to fail. And the logic behind it is if we don't finish, we can't fail. That's like your subconscious. Like, well, if I don't finish, then I can't fail. The 4th one that I'm not really going to cover is also people pleasing. That's its own. We would need a whole thing on like business boundaries. So that's a whole nother training, but that's another response to fear. And I would say that there's a bit of perfectionism in all of this. This is another P word, right? So we're going to talk about how to stop this cycle. So the imposter cycle is where you fight or prove, right? So number 1, you feel like a fraud. So number 2, you prove by overworking. So number 3, maybe you get recognized by others and that feels good. But if you have imposter syndrome, if you have negativity bias, you don't believe or recognize your wins. So then, oopsie, you're back to number 1, feeling like a fraud, right? And you're stuck in this wheel of unhappiness, right? And here's why it makes you unhappy, because you're basing your happiness on external validation instead of internal beliefs. So maybe you're like, oh, people are saying like, good job, you're doing great. And you're like, okay, good. But then when they don't say you're doing great, you're like, I'm a failure, and it's all based on external validation. What I want for you is to base your happiness on internal beliefs instead of external validation. And that happens by when you feel like a fraud, you start proving by overworking, you get recognized by others, you start actually believing and recognizing your wins. So that is one approach. I'll talk more about this in a minute. The other one is the imposter cycle of flight or procrastinating. So if you feel like a fraud, and then number 2, you procrastinate until it's perfect. Number 3, you don't take action. Maybe you're paralyzed. This also works for paralysis too. You don't take action and you don't get any wins. Okay, so then you feel like a fraud because I don't have any wins, so clearly I'm a fraud. You don't have any evidence, right? So here's how you stop the cycle. When you feel like fraud, you maybe are procrastinating until it's perfect. Like that's definitely a cycle I've seen in a lot of the women that I've um, coached is they have this thing called perfectionist procrastinator where they're like, I will do it when my website is perfect. I will do it when I have all the worksheets ready. I will do it when, or like in the comments, like when my hair and makeup's done, or you know what I mean? When I'm more organized, when my office is fully clean. And so how you stop the cycle is you just I should add messy action. You're going to take messy action. Sometimes that means doing B minus work. This is something I learned from Jody Moore, and that is doing B minus work. Like showing up. The last couple of reels I've made, I'm like, oh, this is crap, but I'm putting it out there. It's B minus work. And I will say, probably because you're an overachiever, your what you consider B minus work is what other people consider an A. They're like, wow, look at her go. She's doing great, right? But because you're a high achiever, because you have high standards, you're probably like, this is crap. But it done is better than perfect. So I'm gonna I want to talk about starting sloppy. This is something I wanted to add here. I had this experience where I called my mom and I was like, oh, my floor is so gross. I need to mop my floor. And she was like, well, what if you just mop it sloppy? What if you just do a crappy job? And I was like, what? I was being a perfectionist procrastinator where I needed to mop it. It was getting bad, but I was like, well, I want to do it perfectly. And she was like, what if you just did a sloppy job? And so I was like, okay. I'm like, I can do that. And so I started and then it wasn't sloppy. That's the funny thing. Sometimes you just telling yourself that you're going to do B minus work or that you're going to start sloppy makes you start and then you actually do great work, right? But when I did that, I mopped and it only took me like 8 minutes. I was actually shocked at how little time it took me. And I got it done. And I was like, wow, I feel great. 8 minutes later. And this has been haunting me for, days. So sometimes just telling yourself, we're going to do big minus work. We're going to start sloppy. We're going to take messy action. That's how you start to shine. That's how those disco balls, the disco ball, start to shine. So here's how we overcome imposter syndrome. I want to encourage you to write your wins. This is how you're going to start collecting evidence in your bag of beliefs of your small accomplishments instead of evidence of your fails. So this is how you focus on the donut and not the hole. It is so easy to focus on the hole, like, oh, here's what I didn't do this, I didn't do that. Or I did it crappy or whatever. I promise you that if you start focusing on your wins and your strengths, that is when you are going to get some momentum. That is when you're going to feel empowered. That is when you're going to feel good and do good. But often we only see how far we have come instead of how far, we only see how far we have to go instead of how far we've come. So I want you to start looking for the wins. There's more than you think. You just weren't paying attention to it. There's a lot of wins here, but we just sometimes focus on that spider, right? So, but here's what I want to tell you. Whatever you focus on will grow. So what do you want to grow? Your doubts or your dreams? Like if you're sick of getting in your way, it's time to focus on your dreams. It's time to focus on your strengths. It's time to focus on your wins. And stop and ignore, you don't need to focus on the little mistakes you make, because you're going to make them. That's a guarantee. But when we focus on those things, it doesn't feel good. And then when we don't feel good, we don't do good. Right. I used to do this even with motherhood. I would be like, oh, I didn't do this well with my kid, or I forgot to pick them up on early out day or whatever. These are all real stories. And I'm like, and then I would be like, I'm a bad mom. Put that in my bag of beliefs. I had this bag of beliefs that like I was a bad mom. And then I would just ignore any evidence of good and it'd be like, yep, keep adding that to my bag of beliefs. And so for years, anytime I made any mistake as a mom, but I would start a shame spiral, which made me feel like horrible. And let me tell you, I just got so sick of feeling horrible about myself. So I was like, I'm done. And maybe you're feeling that way in some area of your life or in your business. And you're like, I'm done. I'm done with feeling this way. You want to feel good. And the only way you're going to feel good is to see the good in you and to focus on your strengths, your wins, your dreams. So here is an example of a, a girl who took my challenge to focus on her wins. And she said, Kelly France asked us, so I did this a while ago on social media where it was the end of the year. It was like the end of 2022, or no, it was the beginning of 2023. It was like January 2023. And I was like, okay, guys, I posted on social media, let's all share some of our wins from last year. Well, I vividly remember Becky commenting and saying, I survived. Do you guys think about what I showed you, how sometimes we feel imposter syndrome because we were deep in survival mode. And so we didn't acknowledge any wins. Well, that was Becky. So she said here, Kelly France asked us what our wins for 2022 were the other day. And I said, I survived. But today she inspired me to actually think about it and write it down. I went back through my photos to remember, which that's a really great way to remember some of your wins is go through and be like, oh yeah, I did that. Or it might just even the photo might remind you of a win you had that week that wasn't photographed. So she did that and she said, she made an entire list for the entire year. And some of them were mom wins, some of them were business wins. But she said, like, I earned a trip to Riviera Maya. I was nominated as a person who nailed it. We laughed so hard one night at dinner. We had a family time going to La Crosse and IKEA, just different things. And she said, it's literally been the best year. And I thought I just survived. And I loved that so much because this is what happens, guys. We're getting survival mode and we forget how far we've come. I'm guessing you probably have forgotten all the baby steps you've taken this year and the progress you've made this year. And that's why it's so important to write our wins. So I started doing this to build a new belief because I didn't want to believe no one's going to buy my class or coaching. And I had to be self-aware to even notice that I had that thought. But I was like, I don't want to believe that. I want to believe that people will buy a class or coaching from me. And so I started a wins note on my phone. And I'm going to show you guys. And I started writing, this is some of the things I wrote on my phone notes. And it just said, I practiced coaching my friend and it helped her. I gave this presentation to my family. You guys, this presentation, when I gave it to my family, was actual garbage. Like it was not good. So they gave me some feedback and I improved it. I created beautiful slides. I organized my stand store. I created a freebie. I got 50 new subscribers from my free self-love journal. I sold 15 spots to my first workshop. I sold my first 1-hour coaching call. I got asked to be a speaker about imposter syndrome. And there's so much more. I'm going to show you really quick my wins journal. Whoops. Here we go. So I've got it right here. And guess how many are on here now? Like there's so many. There are literally 74 things. And I want to have at least 100, if not 200 by the end of the year. So this is how I'm collecting evidence. And when I look back, I'm like, oh, I forgot I did that. Oh, I forgot I did that. It's just like baby steps. And let me tell you, so now I'm starting, as I started collecting wins or evidence, I started building a new belief that was like, it's possible that people will pay for coaching or courses. Like maybe it's possible. I didn't even think like you don't have to, when you have a negative thought, you don't have to go instantly to a positive thought. Sometimes you can just go to a neutral thought or a possible thought. And so I started being like, well, it's possible. And that was empowering enough. That's all I needed, was to be like, maybe it's possible. And then started adding in these wins. And then I started getting more people hiring me and more, more wins that gave me, you start getting momentum this way, guys. That's how, when you're first riding your bike, right? When you first get on your bike, here's another analogy for you. My, uh, here, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. I remember the first time when I was trying to teach my daughter how to ride a bike, she was freaking out. Like, it was actually hilarious because we were on like the most flat road ever, and she would start to pedal and stuff, and then she would get a little bit of momentum. She'd be like, "Ah!" Like she'd literally scream out loud. I'd be like, "You're good. You're like, you got this." And this was even with training wheels. Like, she was freaking out. Sometimes we have fear of success, right? We're like, "Whoa, we're getting momentum. This is scary. Am I gonna like, wait, do I actually want people to hire me or buy from me?" Right? But once you start getting that momentum, that's when it actually gets fun. It's not fun when you're like in the slow mode. And that's why it's super important to be committed and consistent so that you can start building that momentum. Because then when you're riding along and you're like, ooh, like the wind is in my hair. I'm feel alive. For me, riding a bike, I feel alive when I ride a bike. Um, and so, yeah, I, you know, when we start to focus on these wins, that's when we build momentum in our business. And that's when it starts to get fun. And I always say, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. So we want to start having fun in our business. I just noticed Jessica's comment that she said she had a dirty diaper in her bag. I love Oh my gosh, love that. Yeah, that's relatable. Then that's what sometimes our negative thoughts look like, right? Um, so let me just go back to sharing my screen and we're gonna wrap it up. And then I'll leave some questions for the end. So here's another one of my friends who said, who am I to, one of her negative thoughts was, who am I to be doing this? What if it doesn't work out? And she started to notice her wins and was like, well, I turned the camera around and I went live. I got a new team member. I made my first sale. I got my first $1,000 paycheck. I learned a new email platform. I set up my first mini chat automation. I wrote an ebook. I created a new freebie. I invested in myself. So now she's starting to collect evidence of her progress. That's building momentum, right? And she's starting to build a new belief that's like, it's possible. She sells digital products. She's like, it's possible that I can make money selling a digital product. So I want to encourage you guys to take action now. And I would love to see it in the comments, actually. I want you to write 3 wins, and I would say business wins. I know there's probably some mom wins, but I want to hear business wins that you've had this week in your business. If you can't think of 3, at least give me 1. I don't know why. Well, we do know why. We know why it's harder to come up with wins than losses. And that's because of our negativity bias, right? Like our brains want to look for the spider, but right now we're looking for the flowers. We're looking for those wins. And what I want to say is the work is the win. It's not the result. The result is yes, that can be a win too. But for me, it's the work. It's the progress that I'm saying, oh, I learned a new, like, I set up a sales page today, or I sent an email to customers today, or I got a new email subscriber, or I shared about my business in my stories. Like, it's the work that is the win. So don't be thinking that you have to have all these results. That is typically the wrong type of mindset. Most people think that way, where they're like, well, I don't have any results, and that's why I am a fraud, and that's why I'm failing at this. No, 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 no. You're not going to get results. I'm sorry. You're not going to get results for a while because you can't Amazon Prime your results. It just takes time. It's like planting a flower, planting a seed. It's not going to grow overnight. It just isn't. I've noticed a pattern. So I used to be a photographer, and then I mentored photographers, and I started a photography school and magazine. Then we sold that for 6 figures. But when I was a photographer, we moved a lot. So we ended up moving different states, and every time I had to start over. And I noticed a pattern of, it took me about 2 years before the real momentum was going, and people were really like, there was word of mouth, and people were like, oh, have you heard of this Kelly girl? So I would say give yourself a solid 2 years of showing up for your business and, you know, staying focused. Because good things take time, guys. They just do. They do. And sometimes it's a patience problem, right? Sometimes it's like, oh, wait, I was talking to one of my friends who just switched her niche. She just narrowed her niche. And she was like, oh, she's just like, I don't know why I'm not getting anyone to sign up. I'm like, girlfriend, you just narrowed your niche like a week ago. So of course you're not getting anyone. Like, you just now have this new niche. So your business is only a week old. So give it some time for sure. Allow yourself to be a beginner. All the pros are just beginners who kept beginning. And here's my final challenge to you guys. And that is, here's my double dare. Here's the thing that I want you to take action, get that disco ball into motion, and write your wins every day for 3 days. If you do nothing else, do this. Just make a note on your phone, and just anytime you have like a tiny little win, write it down. And I promise you, it's going to be really empowering. It's going to start to feel really good. And then here's how you can take it to the next level. Do it for 30 days. Do it for a whole month and see how that helps you. And then if you're feeling real crazy, you could do it for a whole 100 days. Or even just get 100 wins. Because there's this book called The 212th Degree, I think. And it's talking about how water doesn't boil until it's at the 212th degree. But it literally will just not even boil until then. Like it will look like you're just like it's just stagnant, right? It will just look like flat water. But boom, on the 212th, it is when it actually like boils and you start to see results. So you might have to show up 212 times before you see that water boil or that result that you're looking for. And so it helps to have the evidence, the wins that you can put in your bag of belief to empower you to do the thing that you want to do, to show up for the thing. If your longing is your calling, if there's something that you're feeling called to do, you need to do it. The world needs what you have to offer. So I'm reading some of your wins right now, and then we'll wrap it up. But this is so much more empowering, reading these wins, right? Than hearing some of those imposter thoughts that pop up. Jessica said, I made a post for Instagram. I emailed my list. I set up time for work. Yes, girl. Heidi said, I've kept some promises to myself and I'm showing up for myself. I love it. Amanda said, I'm announcing on social media about my offer. Yes, girl. Heidi said, I attended 2 different trainings in 1 week. That's awesome. Trainings, listening to audiobooks. Literally, this training is a win, you guys. You showed up and listened to a training that was an hour long. That's a win. Natalie said, I threw out the rules. Yes, she did. And girl, like, she's one of my private coaching clients. And we were talking about, she was like, I'm so sick of following the rules of social media. And I was like, then don't. And she has had incredible results since then. And just wins too. Like, one of the things, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, Natalie, but one of the things she texted me was, I made a reel and it took me took me way shorter because it was B- work, right? It probably was like, there were no rules. She just put it out there and she's had so much momentum in just the 1 week from throwing out the rules. Erin said, I planned social media posts for the week. I reached out to potential clients. I love that. You guys, look at all these wins. Doesn't that feel good? Doesn't that feel so much better than adding negative thoughts to your bag of belief and then starting to believe them, which is going to give you those 3 P's of imposter syndrome, where you procrastinate or you prove or you are paralyzed. We don't want that. We want to move. We want to shine. So I'm going to open it up for any questions. And if there aren't any, then we'll wrap it up. But you can feel free to unmute yourself or just write it in the chat and I'll answer any questions you have about maybe imposter thoughts you've had or anything you're struggling with. Okay, then I'm going to wrap it up. Yeah, okay. Heidi said, can we talk about the fear of being judged? Yes, we can. Let's do this. Do you mind unmuting yourself? If you don't mind, because I guarantee you everyone else is like perking up because they're like, I feel this too. Okay, Heidi, tell me more about this. Or ask me.
Yeah, I feel like one of my things that holds me back, and I think I've told you this before, is just the fear of people misjudging me and prejudging me and like thinking I'm somebody who I'm not, or thinking bad things about me and things like that.
Yeah. And that's real. And that's like, that's false evidence appearing real, right? Where it's like, and you know what? Here's the thing. There might be a few people that judge you. There probably will be. Like, but there's also going to be people that judge you positively too. I feel like when I see a woman putting herself out there and trying something new, I'm like, dang, good for her. Like she's brave. Like I'm like judging her in like a positive way. Um, I'm going to share a couple thoughts on this. And then Natalie said she has a thought that she just heard this week about this too. So one thing that for me, there's a few thoughts I had, like a few opposite thoughts to that one that have helped me when I'm like, oh, but this person's going to judge me. Here's a few of them. One is that their opinions don't pay my bills. And like, mama needs money. So like, I'm sorry. You can like, go ahead and judge me or unfollow. I'm like, you can unfollow me. Like, I am not putting a gun to your head to stay my Facebook friend, to follow me on, on Instagram or anything. But, so that's one. The other thought that has really helped me was this, talk by Brene Brown. And it's called Why Your Critics Don't Count. I might have shared this before. Have I shared this with you before, Heidi?
I don't think
Okay.
so.
Well, I'm going to share it because it was really, really empowering to me. And she says, your critics don't count because they're not in the arena. She does like this boxing analogy, and it's from a quote by Teddy Roosevelt that she shared too. But basically, she said, your critics are not in the arena getting knocked down like daily, right? When you show up on social media, when you do a post, you're in the arena putting yourself out there, and there's potential to be like hit, right? There's potential for your pride to be hit, for, you know, maybe negative comment or two, or people that judge you. But for me, anyone that's in the cheap seats, their opinions don't count. Like I'm sorry, but you're not in it doing the thing. So your opinion is irrelevant to me. Now, if you're someone that's like also doing what I'm doing and, you know, putting yourself out there daily and you have like a thought or you have like a suggestion for me, I will listen. But if you're not in the arena, sorry, girl, like if you're just my, you know, my like relative that's, you know, stalking, never ever posts on social media, just stalks and has an opinion on my last post, you're not in the arena, your opinion doesn't count, you're not doing. And there's been multiple times where I've had to say this conversation to my mom where I'm like, I know, but this is I know what I'm doing. This is my thing. And she's like, oh, I'm worried about this vulnerable post you did on social media. I'm like, Mom, I know what I'm doing. Like, it's going to be fine. So that was really empowering. So search that up, watch the YouTube video. It's called Why Your Critics Don't Count by Brene Brown. Watch that on YouTube. It's like very empowering. And then often I've noticed that usually it's like one or two people. Like when I ask, I'm like, but who is it? Like who is it? It's usually like probably three people that you're thinking of. And so for me, it's like, am I going to let three people stop me from helping other women grow their business or helping other women, get healthy or whatever your niche is? Am I going to let three people get in the way of me doing what I'm feeling called to do? Right. So that also has been empowering. Those three thoughts have been really helpful to me. Natalie, I know you're driving, but what was the one you were going to share?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I'm so glad that you didn't listen to your imposter syndrome thoughts, because if you had, you wouldn't be doing the individual coaching and changing people's lives like me. And
Aw,
that would have never happened. So
thank
grateful for that.
you.
And just this weekend, I was at a business social media summit, and one of our leaders got up and he said, "We are so worried about what other people think about us. But in reality, those people are so worried about themselves and what other people think about them that they don't have time to think about you or to judge you." And I was like, it was just this light bulb moment of like, yeah, we all want to know, like, what about me? And
Yes.
we're worried about ourselves so much that, and you are going to have some, like you said, haters or just, but like, again, they're not in the arena. But I just love that. Most people are more concerned with themselves and what people are thinking about them. That just was like,
Yes. That is
blew it open for me.
so true. It's kind of like that, how I was saying when I dropped my son off, all those boys were like glaring him up and down. I can guarantee you they were all scared out of their minds too, right? And it's like, when we see, like maybe you'll see someone's post and you're like, huh, you'll think about maybe you do judge them, but you judge them for 3 seconds and then you're moving on because you're too busy with your own stuff. And it's like, we have our own everybody's too worried. It's like in high school, everybody, like first day of school, everyone's like so worried about their own outfit. They're not paying attention to anybody else's first day of school outfit, right? It's the same thing. Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Natalie. Um, does that help you, Heidi? It's
Yeah,
true.
definitely. Like it's good to be reminded of those things for sure.
Yeah, and I want to say this too. So I've been on Instagram for as long as my youngest was a baby. So he's now 12. And I've hardly gotten hate comments. Like hardly at all. I think if if you have positive vibes, I don't think you typically attract that. And if you don't have polarizing content, I mean, if you do, like if that's what you want to do, that's fine. You know that if you have polarizing content, it's probably going to, attract a little bit. But when I do get a snarky comment, bye bye, delete, block. Like this is my space. And if you are going to be rude or, you know, like say snarky things about me, like bye. It's a boundary I have. Like I don't need that negativity in my life or in my social space. Does that help, Heidi?
Yeah, it helps. I think it's also just a matter of like you were saying earlier, just like do it and do it messy and then deal with it, because like the fear of having to deal with it is probably actually worse. Excuse me, or maybe the first couple of times you get a bad comment or harsh judgment is worse, but then you get used to it, but you'll never get used to it if you don't do it.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a huge thing. I actually heard a really great quote from one of the coaches on here. Summer is on here. I'm going to share this that she shared. And that is sometimes when we are avoiding the fear, it makes the fear like stronger. She was saying, think of fear like in another room, or fear or anxiety and I'm probably going to butcher this, Summer, so you can just chime in if I if I say it wrong. But think of like fear or anxiety in another room and you're sort of avoiding it, right? You're avoiding that fear, that anxiety. And so it's in the other room and you like peek in and you're like, oh, there's fear. Oh, there's anxiety. And you close the door. And so the fear or anxiety is like, no, like pay attention to me, and then but instead, if you went in and just sat by the fear and like did it with fear, the fear is going, you're going to take away the fear's power. It's not going to be pounding at your door. Summer said, I'm doing great. Okay. So that was a huge epiphany when she said that to me. I'm like, yeah, I think that's part of what causes anxiety is like the fear of the fear. You know what I mean? And so if we sometimes think of it as like, I'm just going to let the fears like sit right next to me while I put myself out there and do it with the fear. Because it's not like I am not afraid. Like we show up afraid and we do it afraid. And eventually it won't be scary, but I agree, Heidi. I think sometimes it's just doing it out, putting it out there, doing it sloppy, doing it messy, and doing it scared. Yeah. Okay, well, we are going to wrap it up. But this has been a great conversation and I hope this has been empowering to you. I can't wait to see your wins. Like, feel free to DM them to me. I would love to see some of those wins because I love cheering you on. And yeah, Jessica just said, fear can sit in the passenger seat, but I'm driving. Ooh, that's a good one. I love having all these coaches on this call too. Awesome. You're in the driver's seat. You got this, guys. Start taking action, messy action, start getting that disco ball shining because the world needs what you have to share. And if it's on your heart to share it, there's a reason. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.